keep a secret? But I don't wanna go to school, Ray McHenry mumbled instinctively to himself as he woke up. It took him a moment to realize it was Saturday. Not just any Saturday, but the Saturday that he had the house all to himself. Well, him and his sister, anyway. He kicked off the covers and rolled out of bed, then headed to the window. His parents' car was gone, they had to leave early to drive to a wedding in a different city. Grinning, he waddled down the stairs to the living room and sat down in front the TV to watch cartoons. His wet night diaper squished under him, but he didn't care. Changing would cut into valuable cartoon watching time. Now, 6 might be a little old to be wearing diapers, but Ray was a bedwetter. One that wet so heavily pull-ups tended to leak, so he still wore diapers to protect his bed. Not that any of that mattered now, he was more concerned with how the Ninja Turtles would get out of their current predicament. Back upstairs, in the bedroom next to Ray's, his sister Trina stirred. Woken by the sound of cartoons, she glanced at her clock. They have a 9 in the morning on Saturdays? Why was I not informed? She let out a rather long yawn and started stretching, working out the knots. Finally, she reached down and sighed. Crap, this was my last one. I'll need to get more. Like her brother, Trina was a bedwetter. Guess they're right about it being genetic. Getting out of bed, Trina shambled in a zombie-like fashion to her closet to double-check her supply of goodnights. She was indeed out, having forgotten to restock earlier in the week. It wouldn't be a problem, but her parents insisted she hide her bedwetting from Ray, lest it affect his own ability to stay dry. She'd have to get more without him knowing, but that could wait until later. She grabbed some random clothes and a towel, as well as a garbage bag, and went down the hall to the bathroom. Slipping out of her nightgown and wet goodnight, which she placed in the garbage bag, Trina stepped into the shower and turned on the water. Ray heard the water turn on, which meant he still had a while before Trina came downstairs. She liked to take long showers in the morning for some reason. Poking at his diaper, he decided it could hold a little more. Ray closed his eyes and relaxed, wetting his already soaked diaper nearly to the point of leaking. He didn't need diapers during the day, but his parents always told him not to waste things. He rationalized that the diaper would just be thrown out anyway. He giggled at the squishy feeling and went to get a bowl of cereal. Trina turned off the water and dried herself off, then got dressed in a t-shirt and a pair of cargo pants. She made sure the garbage bag with her used goodnight was securely tied and headed downstairs, tossing her nightgown in a hamper along the way. She saw Ray plop down in front of the TV when she entered the living room. "Hey little guy." Ray mumbled something that might have been hi between mouthfuls of cereal. "Talkative today, huh?" She casually went out the back door and tossed the bag in a garbage can, then came back in and made herself some toast. "Are you getting dressed? You don't want to wear pajamas all day." "Yes I do," Ray said clearly this time, even turning away from the TV. Trina rolled her eyes as she finished her toast. "Let me rephrase. You don't want to wear a wet diaper all day." Ray blushed and nodded. He was starting to feel a little clammy. Okay, he waddled to the kitchen and put his cereal bowl in the sink. As he did, his sister leaned down to feel his bottom. "Hey. You're pretty wet, kiddo. You better take a bath." He crossed his arms and tried to look defiant. "Oh no you don't. Who do you think's getting blamed if you get a rash?" Ray looked down and blushed some more. "Fine." He went up the stairs with Trina close behind, unaware that she was smirking at how he waddled. He stripped down to just his diaper as Trina got the water running. "Geez, Ray. I think you have a drinking problem." She didn't like teasing him too much since she also had a problem, but she was honestly surprised his sagging diaper hadn't leaked. She carefully untaped it and put it in a garbage bag, then helped him in the tub. It didn't take too long, since Ray was actually pretty good at cleaning himself. He just needed supervision so he didn't spend 40 minutes playing in the water and getting all pruny. She pulled the plug and helped him dry off. "What do you say?" Ray mumbled something. "What was that?" "Thanks, sis," Ray said, still mumbling a bit. Trina nodded. "Now go get dressed." She watched him leave, and then yelled after him. "Real clothes, not more pajamas." "Oh, you're no fun." She sealed the bag with the diaper and went to dispose of it in the same can she deposited her goodnight in earlier. HMPH, what's the point of mom and dad being gone if I can't wear pajamas all day? Ray asked no one in particular as he got dressed, picking a red shirt with a lightning bolt on it and some shorts. A moment later, he heard a voice from outside the door. "You all set, Ray? Got everything in the right holes and all that?" "Yep." "Okay, I've got stuff to do, give a shout if you need anything." "Aha." Ray turned his toys. With that distraction out of the way, he could get on to more important matters, helping the Decepticons conquer the Earth. Trina returned to her own room and quickly cleaned up, making her bed and picking up some randomly placed clothes and books. It was time to put her plan in motion. Since she couldn't let Ray know she needed goodnights, she couldn't take him to the store with her to get some. She also couldn't simply leave him at home. What she needed was a patsy, and she knew just the one. She grabbed her phone and hit the speed dial, waiting a moment for someone to answer. "Hello." "Hi Dougie, what's up?" "Oh, hey Trin." "Nothing much, I guess." "You?" "I'm watching the little guy while the folks are out of town." "You heading to the mall today?" "Yeah." Dougie paused a moment. "Do you need something?" This would be the hard part. "Yeah. I need you to pick me up something." "I'm out of," even though Ray wasn't around, she lowered her voice anyway. "I'm out of goodnights." Oh. You are?" Dougie was the only one outside of her parents who knew about Trina's problem, after noticing a goodnights package by accident. He hadn't blabbed her secret yet, so she figured she could trust him. "Yeah. Could you get me some while you're out?" Dougie stalled. "Can't you just use one of Ray's?" "I tried once, I needed duct tape to." "Hey, don't change the subject." I dunno, it's kind of embarrassing." Trina smiled, almost feeling him blushing on the other end of the line. "Come on, they'll be girls' goodnights, no one'll think they're for you." I suppose that's true." He sighed. "Fine, I'll be over in a couple hours. Bye." "Hey, you're the best, see you then." She hung up and looked at the clock. It was getting to be lunchtime, she should probably whip something up. Ray stood up on his tiptoes to see over the edge of the counter. "You're using mozzarella instead of cheddar, right?" "Right. And you cut off the crusts." "You like crusts, you just want me to do extra work." Ray shrugged. "Yeah. What did you make it with?" "Worms. The finest imported from Belgium." Trina replied with a smirk. "Or turkey. I always get them confused." Not clarifying if she meant the country or the meat, she put the sandwich on a plate and handed it to Ray. "Now go eat." She watched him sit down at the table and made a sandwich for herself. After lunch was finished, she turned to Ray and asked, "So, what do you want to do?" "Watch a movie." "Sure." She ended up putting on a DVD of old Batman cartoons and they watched them on the couch for about an hour before there was a knock on the door. Ray didn't even look away from the TV. "Who's that?" "I'll get it." Trina got up off the couch and went to the door. "Hey Dougie." She went into her best impression of a drug dealer from a bad movie. "You got the stuff?" "Hey Trini." He held up a plain shopping bag. "Right here." Trina took the bag. "You're a lifesaver." Ray entered from the living room. "Hi Dougie, what you doing?" He looked up at Trina, who was now holding the bag close to her chest as if to hide it. "What's that?" Dougie reached down and ruffled the boy's hair. "Hey there, Ray. Just dropping something off for your sister." Ray looked up at the bag again. He couldn't tell what was inside, but the shape seemed familiar. He'd never seen his sister blush like that either. What could it be? He kept trying to think where he'd seen a package shaped like that before. My diapers. But why would Trina blush and try to hide them? Unless. His eyes went wide. They are for you. You wear diapers. He watched Trina turn even redder. Dougie was blushing too. You know what I haven't seen in a while? Your kitchen. He awkwardly left, leaving the siblings alone. Well, they're not technically diapers, they're pull-ups. She rambled, trying to keep her blushing under control. Oh. Started to feel bad since she clearly seemed upset. How come you tried to hide em? Oh, that. Mom made a big deal about not telling you. She said it would slow down your toilet training if you knew I wet the bed, and now she just says knowing would make you wet the bed longer or something. Her blushing was under control now. Could you not tell her you know? Ray shrugged. I guess. Thanks, little guy. Dougie poked his head out of the kitchen and saw that things were under control. So, what are you guys up to? Oh. Ray smiled, seeming not to care about what just happened. We were watching Batman. He grabbed Dougie's arm and dragged him to the living room. Dougie smiled. Batman, huh? If you're going to force me, I suppose I'll join you. As the two boys went into the living room, Trina took the opportunity to run the goodnights up to her room. She put them in the usual hiding place to keep up appearances, and then went back downstairs. The opening credits to the next Batman episode had ended. She fell back onto the couch in between Ray and Dougie. She gradually leaned in closer to Dougie, but Ray noticed and made a kissing sound, causing them to blush and sit perfectly straight for the remainder of the episode. Once the episode ended, Dougie looked at his watch. It's been fun, but I should really head home. He gave Ray's hair another ruffle and gave Trina a quick hug, and then they said their goodbyes. With Dougie gone, Ray went back to his room and played for a while, giving Trina a chance to catch up on her reading. Soon enough dinner time rolled around, and they ordered a pizza with the food money their parents had left for them. They probably ate too much, but it didn't seem worthwhile to save just 2 slices of pizza. Soon after they finished up, the phone rang and Trina answered. McHenry Residence, how may I direct your call? Very funny, said the voice on the other end. How are you two holding up? We're just fine, Mom. How's the wedding? Mrs. McHenry sighed. It's a wedding. That bad, huh? Trina heard a faint voice in the background. Oh crap, he passed out in the cake. I really need to go. Remember Ray's bedtime? Trina nodded, despite the fact her mother couldn't see it. I will, Mom. Try to have fun. As she hung up, Ray walked up to her. Who was that? Wrong number. But you were talking a while. And you called it Mom. Trina smirked. If you knew it was Mom, why'd you ask? Ray growled at being found out and stormed up to his room. He returned to his Transformers and continued his battle from before, with the Decepticons delivering a crushing defeat to the Autobots. As the night wore on, Trina came up to his room. Time for bed. Ray stifled a yawn. Oh, do I have to? You sure do. Since you had a bath earlier and we didn't go out, you can get away with just washing your hands and face. She thought a moment. And make sure you go to the bathroom, too. I'll get your stuff ready. As Ray nodded and left, Trina got out his pajamas and a diaper, feeling a little guilty over not telling him the truth all those years. When Ray returned, she looked down at him. Hold out your hands. She examined them a minute, then nodded. Good job. Ray got undressed and tossed his clothes in the hamper, then laid down on the changing pad Trina had set up on his bed. So, you need these too? Blushing, Trina nodded. Yep, all my life. She slid the diaper under him and applied a little too much powder, coughing a bit. Ray giggled. She taped his diaper snugly into place and helped him into his pajamas, then gave him a quick pat on the bottom. Hey! Ray blushed as she helped him into bed and tucked him in. Thanks, sis. Good night. He yawned again as he settled into bed. Good night, Ray, sweet dreams. She carefully snuck out of his room and switched off the light. Not having much else to do, she went back downstairs to watch a movie. She put the disc in the player and curled up on the couch. Yawning as the credits rolled, Trina turned off the lights in the living room and returned to her room, throwing her clothes in the general direction of the hamper as she took them off. She grabbed a goodnight from the new package and slid in on, then put her nightgown on over it. She yawned one last time as she turned out the lights, then got into bed and nodded off. Ray groggily woke up and looked around. Seeing it was still dark, he tried to get back to sleep, but there was something wrong. There was an intense pain in his abdomen, which felt almost like he had to go to the bathroom. Maybe I did have too much pizza. He didn't like getting up in the middle of the night, but he liked messing himself even less, so he rolled out of bed and carefully tried to walk to the bathroom. He had opened his door halfway when the pain intensified, causing him to double over. Ray let out what he thought was a muffled fart, but there was a strange feeling on his bottom. For the first time in quite a long while, he was messing his diaper. Caught by surprise, he didn't even try to make it to the bathroom and finished going right there in his room. His hand made its way down to his bottom and he felt the warm mass he had deposited there. Sniffling, he wondered what he would do now. Sis. Trina turned over and looked at the clock. 4 in the morning. This better not be the boogeyman. What is it, Ray? He sniffled, I had an accident. Huh? Trina yawned. You have an accident every night, can't it wait till morning? Ray looked down, and she could tell he was blushing just from the light in the hall. Not that kind of accident. That's when the smell hit her. Ray. She got out of bed and knelt down beside him, then reached around to feel his bottom. Are you feeling okay? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. He had moved on from sniffling to sobbing. Trina gave him a hug, and he buried his head in her shoulder. Sure, it's okay. Let's go get you cleaned up, all right. Ray meekly nodded and she picked him up, careful not to put pressure on the seat of his diaper. She carried him back to his room and got the changing supplies out. Their mother had gotten used to using baby wipes for some normal household cleaning, so there was an ample supply on hand. Ray shuddered as he settled down on the changing pad and felt the mess squish under him. Blushing, he looked away as his sister pulled his pajama bottoms out of the way. It had been nearly 3 years since the last time Trina had to change Ray's dirty diaper, so she tried her best to keep a neutral expression as she went to work. Are you feeling okay? Ray nodded a little as she untaped his diaper and started cleaning him. It took several wipes, which she put in a garbage bag along with the diaper. She applied some powder and slid the fresh diaper under him, securely taping it shut. Do you want to tell me what happened? Ray sighed as Trina pulled his pajama bottoms back into place. It hurt real bad, here. He put his hand over his belly button. Like I had to go, but worse. I tried to go to the bathroom, but I couldn't hold it in. Trina nodded, tying the bag with the dirty diaper in a tight knot, then double-bagging it just to be safe. I'll be right back. She went to dispose of the bag and wash her hands, then returned. She put her hand against Ray's forehead. You don't have a fever. How do you feel? Okay, I guess. It doesn't hurt anymore. She pulled him up off the changing pad and into a hug. Maybe you just had too much pizza. Do you want to go back to bed? Yawning as he returned the hug, Ray nodded. I'm pretty tired, I guess. Trina quickly got him tucked back in. Thanks for helping me. It's okay, little guy. Try to get some sleep. She switched off the light and went back to her room, stopping to use the bathroom along the way. Trina woke up the following morning to discover she was dry. Great, after all that trouble I went through to get more good nights. She changed into a pair of panties and went to use the bathroom. On her way out, she noticed that she couldn't hear the TV on downstairs. Ray's always awake before me. She peeked into Ray's room and saw he was still asleep. Ray? How's it going? He turned over and mumbled something. Trina entered the room and sat on the edge of the bed. Are you feeling any better? She felt his forehead. Still no fever. Ray sat up, but didn't meet her gaze. I feel fine. He started to blush, and mumbled, I'm really sorry about what happened. I told you, don't worry about it. Trina said as she gently rubbed his shoulder. Hey, I wanted to tell you a story, it might make you feel better. Ray shrugged, which she thought could be a yes. It was about 6 years ago, right after you were born. Mom and Dad were giving you a lot of attention, and I was feeling jealous. They were always busy taking care of you, it seemed. Ray looked up, starting to get interested. What happened? Well, Trina began, feeling just a little nervous. I haven't told this to anyone before, not Mom or Dad, or anyone else. What is it? Ray leaned in closer, definitely intrigued. She took a deep breath. After what happened yesterday, you probably know that I was wearing pull-ups to bed back then, too. One day, I was even more jealous of you than usual. I don't even remember what it was about anymore. She lowered her voice, even thought the house was empty. That night, I pooped in my pull-up, and told Mom and Dad I was sick. They believed me, and they helped me get cleaned up, sort of like how I helped you last night. But I didn't do that on purpose. I know. But when they helped me, I saw that they really did care, and I got over my jealousy. Understand? Ray nodded. Yeah. Hey, weren't you older than I am now when I was born? Trina saw where this was going. I suppose I was. And you pooped yourself on purpose? Ray said with a smirk. Trina gave an indignant look. Hey, I let you in on a deep personal secret. And I also changed your dirty diaper last night. Right, that thing. You won't tell Mom and Dad about that? She gave him a sly grin. I won't tell them your secret if you don't tell them mine. Deal. He gave her a quick hug. Speaking of diapers. While returning the hug, Trina reached down and checked his diaper. You're only wet, but after what happened last night, you better have a bath. Ray nodded and followed her to the bathroom, where she went about bathing him in the same fashion she had the previous day. Afterwards, she carried him back to his room wrapped in a towel. I know you said you feel fine now, but just to be safe, I think you should wear a diaper. Ray blushed. It was embarrassing, sure, but it was nothing compared to what Trina told him a little while ago. I dunno. Won't Mom and Dad see? If you don't have any accidents, you can change into underwear before they get back. They won't get home for a while. But if you do have an accident, it'll be better to have a diaper on. He couldn't argue with that logic, and he didn't really mind sitting around in his diaper whenever he first gets up in the morning. Okay, if you think I should. Trina set him down on the pad and diapered him, using the right amount of powder this time. There you go, all set. Finish getting dressed, I need to go change. She indicated her nightgown. Ray, who was digging through a drawer, thought she meant something else. You mean your, good night? Huh? Trina realized how easily her last statement could be misinterpreted. "Oh, I changed out of that when I first woke up, I meant my nightgown." "Oh." Ray tried on a third pair of shorts, finally finding one that fit over his bulky diaper. "Did you?" Trina blushed at the question, even though she woke up dry. She was about to answer, but decided after what Ray did last night, he could use some solidarity. "It was wet, yeah." Ray nodded as he started looking for a shirt, and Trina slipped out to her own room, lightly kicking the door shut as she pulled her nightgown off and got dressed, choosing a hoodie and a long denim skirt. She met Ray at the top of the stairs and they went down for breakfast, then settled down into a typical Sunday morning routine. Trina curled up on the couch and read, while Ray organized some elaborate chases through the living room with his toy cars. When he had to, Ray made it to the bathroom without any difficulty, but he needed Trina's help getting his diaper back on afterwards. For lunch, Trina thought chicken soup would be a good idea given Ray's troubles. Once they were finished, she went to work setting up the DVD player so they could watch the next disc of the Batman set, but was interrupted by a knock on the door. Ray, who was already on the couch, looked towards the door. "Who's that?" Trina shrugged. "I don't know. I'm not expecting anyone." She carefully went to peek out the window, and smiled as she opened the door. "Hi, Dougie." "Hey there," said Dougie. "I thought a certain babysitter could use some caffeine." He held up a drink tray with a large cup of coffee and 2 soft drinks. "You read my mind." Dougie waved his free hand around in a dramatic fashion and made a whistling noise. "Mind taking?" Trina chuckled. "Come on in, we were about to watch some more of Batman." "Look who's here, Ray." She led Dougie into the house and closed the door. When Ray saw that Dougie was coming in, he grabbed a blanket to conceal his diaper bulge. He managed to cover himself from the waist down just as the 2 teens entered. "Hiya, Dougie." "Ray's not feeling well." Trina sat down next to him and rubbed his shoulder. "That's why we're just staying in today." "Oh, I'm sorry to hear that." Dougie gave Ray a supportive smile. "I got you some orange juice, that's supposed to be good for you when you're sick." He sat next to Trina and distributed the drinks, including another orange juice for himself. "Thanks." Ray took a small sip. "Can we watch Batman now?" Trina nodded and pushed the play button on the remote, starting the first episode. By the halfway point of the second episode, the chicken soup and orange juice had taken an effect on Ray, and he started to fidget. He looked over at Dougie. If he got up off the couch, he would have to take his blanket off. And if he took his blanket off, Dougie would see his diaper. He then looked over to Trina, who was resting her head on Dougie's shoulder. Yesterday he had made fun of them for doing that, but now he was glad they were distracted from him. They wouldn't notice how he had been fidgeting, or that he had stopped fidgeting. They certainly wouldn't notice the blank look on his face as he wet his diaper. He had wet his diaper on purpose before, but it was usually his already wet night diaper. It was an odd feeling to wet a dry one. Once Ray had finished, he scooted a little closer to his sister. She put her arm around his shoulder and smiled down at him. He smiled back, acting as if nothing was wrong. Before long, the third episode had ended. "I need to get going," Dougie announced. "I hope you feel better, Ray." "Thanks for the coffee," Trina said as she leaned over to give Dougie a kiss on the cheek. "See you later." Dougie blushed as he got off the couch. "Bye." He ruffled Ray's hair and waved. Ray waved back. "Gee, bye Dougie, thanks for the juice." "You're welcome," Dougie said as he made his way to the door, which he closed behind himself as he left. Trina looked down at Ray again. "Mom and Dad will be home soon, how'd you like to change into a pair of underwear now?" Ray blushed and looked away. He didn't want to say anything, but Trina would be the one getting rid of his diaper. "I wet my pants." "You did?" She was starting to get concerned, and rubbed his shoulder again. Do you think you should wear another diaper, since you're still having accidents? Ray thought a moment before answering. No. Why not? What if you have another accident? He sighed. I won't. Trina had an idea where this was going. You know you won't have an accident later because you didn't have an accident now, right? I'm sorry, I didn't want to get off the couch. Ray rambled. I didn't want Dougie to see I had a diaper on. Dougie wouldn't care if you had a diaper on. Trina said as she pulled him a little closer. He knew you were sick, right? I guess. Ray mumbled with a shrug. It's not the same. Well, it was my idea that you should wear a diaper. And come to think of it, I never told you that you couldn't use it. You won't tell Mom and Dad? Ray said, looking hopeful. Trina grinned. Nope, but we better get you into some dry pants before they get home. Thanks, sis. He gave her a hug and hopped off the couch, then headed up to his room with Trina following close behind. Once again, he was blissfully unaware she was grinning at his waddle. Trina pulled Ray's shorts off, then put him down on the changing pad. I see you put this diaper to good use. She tickled him before untaping his diaper and cleaning him up. Ray giggled at the tickling, and as Trina went to dispose of his diaper, he grabbed a pair of underwear, which he put on along with his shorts. As he arrived downstairs, their parents' car was just pulling up. He grabbed Trina's hand and led her to the front door. Hi, Mom. Mrs. McHenry was the first in. Hey kids, did you have fun without us? Trina shook her head. Oh no, how could we possibly have fun without you? Right, Ray. She nudged Ray, who nodded in agreement while trying not to laugh. This from my own children. Mrs. McHenry said while shaking her head with mock disappointment. Did you have any problems? Well, there was one thing, Trina began. When I was getting Ray ready for bed last night, I noticed that some of his diapers were defective. The outer covers were all torn, they probably would have leaked. Her mother nodded. What did you do with them? Oh, I put them aside and then threw them out with his wet diaper this morning. Mrs. McHenry thought a moment. If you had saved them, we could have complained to get a free pack. Trina shrugged. I hadn't considered that. I'll remember that if it ever happens again. She winked down at Ray. How did the wedding go? Struggling to think of what to say, Mrs. McHenry stammered, it was terrible. Mr. McHenry finally entered, after having been distracted by a neighbor. The father of the bride got drunk, started a fight with who he assumed was the father of the groom. Cool. Ray said, his eyes going a little wide. Only it was a waiter. Mr. McHenry rolled his eyes as he continued. Who was younger than the groom. And wearing a hotel staff uniform. And who apparently was a martial arts student. Wow, sounds exciting, said Trina. Mrs. McHenry rubbed her forehead. Long story short, we may get called as witnesses at an assault trial. Did you get us anything? Ray said expectantly. Mr. McHenry searched his pockets. We sure did. He pulled out a piece of paper and held it out. Trina took it and quickly read it over. It's a receipt from the hotel. It's not just a receipt, her father said indignantly. It's a memento of the love shared between my second cousin and the lowlife jerk who married her for her money. Oh, how romantic. Trina said, trying to sound excited. Anyway, what are we doing for dinner? Just something quick. Mrs. McHenry said. How about pizza? Ray and Trina looked at each other a moment, then said in unison. No pizza.
They say you should never go back. But that is exactly what I did. I had no great expectations that everything would be the same. After all, it was 30 years since I visited my hometown. Yet I stood on the pavement on a cold and wet afternoon looking at a sign on a shop. The Candy Box. Amidst new and strange architectural nightmares that made me want to start singing Little Boxes, an old and familiar sign. Sure, the shop had been modernized. Plate glass windows displayed sweets and chocolates that had never been heard of 30 years ago. However, the shop was still there. I wondered what happened to the people who used to run the shop. Mrs. Evans was the first owner, and when she died her daughter Miss Evans took over. I suppose they did have first names, but to us kids, it was always Mrs. and Miss. We never knew about Mr. Evans. Our mums would talk in hushed voices about him, then suddenly change the subject when little flapping ears came too close. Died in the war, my mum told me when I asked, then told me to go and wash my hands and be quick smart about it because tea was ready. I never did believe he died in the war. Kids are not daft, they pick up on the atmosphere and exchanged glances. Miniature Sherlock Holmes. Anyway, what we didn't know, we invented. Miss Evans was 25 and very attractive. It was the age of miniskirts. I remember the furor that erupted when Miss Evans first wore a miniskirt in the shop. Disgraceful, shouldn't be allowed. Or no discipline, that's her problem, her mum was far too soft on her. Mrs. Jenkins even informed my mum that no good will come of that girl, you mark my words. I didn't mind the miniskirt and neither did Billy Jenkins, who got a clip across the ear when he told his mum so. It was the bit about no discipline that puzzled me. It was well known to us that Mrs. Evans had her own way of dealing with schoolboy and schoolgirl shoplifters. We didn't actually think of it as shoplifting, we just thought of it as nicking something from the old woman. I laugh at that now, as the old woman was the same age as I am now on this cold, wet afternoon. Those days were yesterday, but how long ago was yesterday? Sometimes it seems like 100 years ago, others, well, it seems like yesterday. Too many times perhaps, I wish it was. Her method was simple and swift. Into the back room for a damn good hiding. Once finished, no more was said, it was over and done with. Boys and girls both felt the weight of Mrs. Evans' justice, equal opportunity one suppose. She had two implements which she collectively called the Avengers. This was in the days when boys imagined themselves to be John Steed and the girls, Emma Peel. If you pinched anything under a shilling it was 6 with the slipper, called Emma. If it was over a shilling, it was up to 9 with the cane, which she named John. Very sexist, I suppose. But in those days if you mentioned glass ceiling you would either think of a greenhouse, without even thinking of what effect it may have, or your mum would say, very nice, but a devil of a job to clean. Many a young boy or girl would come out from the back room rubbing their bottoms. They always said how hard she whacked, but that they didn't cry. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't, but no one ever seemed to be in the same distress as when Mr. Williams the headmaster, or Mrs. Thomas his deputy gave the cane, and they did it over clothes. Anyway, our mums knew what she used to do and never complained. Some of the younger mums had even experienced being bent over Mrs. Evans's sofa. I always found that odd because when I was a kid, I never imagined my mum getting into trouble. In my mind, mums were always well behaved at school and home. That proves how illogical I could be at times. My vision didn't seem compatible with the oft-used phrase. If I would have spoken to my mother like that, I would have got what for. I suppose the use of the word if and not when makes the difference. When old Mrs. Evans died, young Miss Evans took over. Not only did she take over the shop, but she continued her mother's methods. The Avengers stayed where they were, and from time to time would be brought out from the cupboard to administer summary justice to the bottoms of those who stuffed Aero bars, Cadbury's Flake or Beano summer editions into their pockets or bags. I was with Freddie Lewis and Sally Stone when Miss Evans saw them pinching a bag of marbles. I saw that you too. Right, out in the back room now. Don't argue or I'll tell your mums. I suppose nowadays we would say the unfortunate duo were between a rock and a hard place. I knew that neither of them got spanked at home, but the mention of the word mom prompted a slow, heads hung low, walk towards the back room. I left the shop and waited outside. 10 minutes later out they came with the words. And you can tell your friends what will happen to them if I catch them stealing things from my shop, ringing in their ears. They looked sorry but not distressed and of course told me that she really laid it on hard, but that they didn't cry. What did she use and how did you get it? I asked although I knew the answer. The slipper, replied Sally. Me first, then Freddie. Had to bend over the back of her sofa. I never saw the back room, not because I was a good boy, but because I never got caught. Let me explain that boast. I only stole once from that or any other shop, and of course, I had a good reason. We never had computer games and board games would somehow bore me. I became inventive and would make my own. I had a thing about competitions, soccer, rugby, you name it, I would have a special cup or tournament for it. I even had a weather cup. 16 cities from the Northern Hemisphere would compete against each other based on the daily weather reports in the newspaper. On one memorable occasion, London made the final against Paris, but lost by about 10 degrees. My games were simple but a little messy. I would make a list of at least 16 teams, sometimes as much as 512. After getting a special World Soccer book, and write them down on paper and then tear up pieces of paper, each with a number on it. These I would put into a brown paper bag, my version of the velvet bag used in FA Cup draws, and pull out the teams. Manchester United v Cardiff City, Liverpool v Dorking. I always wanted a giant killer in the competition. The matches were decided by 2 packs of cards. Each team would have 20 cards, but the stronger teams would have more 1s, 2s, 3s and 4s, while the weaker teams would have more nils. I would then pick a card for each team. Sometimes I had to pick a card 3 or 4 times before my team won. But I was fair and limited it to 5 attempts. Manchester United 0, Cardiff City 7. That's better. It was such a competition that made me to resort to crime. I lost the 2 packs of cards. I didn't exactly lose the packs, it was more that Tommy Simpkins threw my bag in the river. Never mind my exercise books or my sandwiches, how are Cardiff City and Liverpool going to play the cup final? I made a decision. I went to the candy box. I browsed at just about everything in the shop waiting for the right moment. Finally, it came. The phone in the back room rang and I was left alone. Quick as a flash, I lifted a flap in the counter, stuffed 2 packs of cards into my pocket and ran like mad, remembering to replace the flap. My team did win, but I lost. That event bothered me for months. I stood looking at the shop and the memories came flooding back. No point standing outside in the rain, I would go in and buy something for old time's sake. A woman in her 50s stood behind the counter and smiled when I walked in. "Can I help you, sir?" she asked. It was her. There was no mistake. No, just looking, thank you. I looked for the jars of gobstoppers, hard-boiled sweets that responsible adults warned you about, but there were no jars anymore, only display stands. "I am surprised this shop is still here," I said. She smiled. "Oh, been close to closing a few times, but managed to stay open." "Have you been here before?" I told her who I was and how long ago it had been. She looked thoughtful, then a look of recognition came over her face. "I remember you. You're Mrs. Wilkins' little boy, only you're not so little anymore." Again she smiled. 30 years older and still attractive. I appreciated her good looks then, and I appreciate them even more now. I had to ask. "Do you still have the Avengers?" She burst into laughter. "Oh, bless my soul, the Avengers. Yes, I still have them somewhere, but of course, I never use them now." I could tell that as she was looking at me, she was processing a picture of me 30 years ago. I felt a little embarrassed. "I can't recall ever using them on you though." She had run the picture through her memory and came up. No matches found. It should have been different, and I always wished it had been. No, I was never caught. Oops. That gives the game away. Once more she laughed. Why, you little devil. Bit too late now though. Was it? We started talking and she asked if I would like to come back after the shop closed for a cup of coffee and a talk about old times. I thanked her and said I would. I had never seen the back room before, and as I sat on the sofa, I wondered if it was the same one that Freddie and Sally had bent over all those years ago. I wondered where they were now, and if they still remembered the incident. Maybe they just shrugged the whole thing off as one of those childhood escapades. I took the coffee and thanked her. It seems that Freddie was now an accountant and Sally was in advertising and chairperson of the local Single Parents Association. Her teenager daughter was delightful and sometimes helped in the shop. Mr. Williams, our old headmaster, was found hanged in his cell in the special protection wing. I guess the rumors were true, but no one ever listened. Perhaps they're not listening now. Perhaps they do listen though, and perhaps they act. Others listen and act. They are in a position to do so, often without consequence. We continued our talk about things long ago, when friends only had chickenpox or mumps. The days when each day, when one thinks about it, were more or less the same. Constant, predictable. But maybe I was lucky. Maybe I was protected from so many things that in my day were not mentioned but now are all too familiar. Coffee turned into an invite to stay for dinner. Dinner, or rather the after-dinner brandy and old records, gave me the chance to mention the deck of cards. I raised the subject just as Rod Stewart sang. Ever since I was a kid in school, I messed around with all the rules, apologized and then realized, I'm no different after all. Do you remember selling packs of cards? I arcade. She smiled. Not a smile of recognition or remembrance, but a smile that said, yes I do, and I know what you are going to say next, you naughty boy. I told her about the 2 packs of cards and my reasons for wanting them so badly. She laughed. I told her how I felt afterward. She smiled. Perhaps it would have been better if I had caught you. A sore bottom is a lot better than all that soul-searching you went through. Yes. It would have been. The topic of conversation changed, but at every opportunity, I brought it back to the pack of cards and the Avengers. Looking at Maureen, I had found out she did have a first name after all, brought back funny, familiar, forgotten feelings. That statement is not quite right. Some feelings are never forgotten and sometimes are not all that funny. She certainly was attractive, and with 30-odd years more experience behind me, I recognized the signs of mutual attraction. Once more I found an excuse to mention the incident. She rose from her chair with an air of determination. One way to sort this out, she said, and walked out of the room. I heard cupboard doors opening and shutting, the sounds of cardboard boxes falling from precarious perches. 10 minutes later she returned. She was carrying John from the Avengers. She stood behind the sofa and said, "Right, let's be having you. Over here please." I looked at her with what I hoped was purely a look of amazement, but which I suspected was tinged with other feelings. Funny, familiar feelings. "You are not serious," I said with a lack of conviction that even failed to convince me. "Do I look as though I am not serious? Over here now." I made of the pretense of walking to the assigned spot under protest. "Bend over the back of the sofa. Palm of your hands flat on the seats." I bent over as instructed, or rather, ordered. "Now let's get on with it, shall we?" Smack. The first stroke landed squarely across the center of my bottom. I did not have too much time to think as the second and third landed very shortly afterwards. "Steal from my shop." Smack. "Would you?" Smack. The fourth stroke was a little slower. She was taking care to select the right spot. Smack. "Maybe next time." Smack. "You will think twice." Smack. "Young man, Get up please and make yourself respectable. 30 years after the incident I received my just desserts. She laid it on really hard, but I didn't cry. I looked at Maureen and saw a smile spread across her face. Don't look so worried, Peter, my mother said. I'm sure he's done this hundreds of times before. Well, maybe not hundreds, the doctor said. But you've nothing to worry about, he assured. Nothing to worry about. That's easy for them to say. All I recall from last night's dream was looking at myself in the mirror, clad in feminine garments and being told that the upper garments I wore were special training ones for boys. Special because it's designed in such a way that it cannot be removed by the wearer. It's not the sort of dream that I want to recall, either consciously or subconsciously. I seldom seem to have normal dreams. Just weird ones where I'm somehow forced or encouraged to wear girls' clothes. More often than not, I wake in a cold sweat and struggle to get back to sleep. Pay attention, Peter. The doctor's speaking to you, my mother said as my mind visibly wandered. Sorry. I gulped. You were saying? I was saying that after a little dream analysis, we'll hopefully get to the bottom of why you're not sleeping too well, the doctor reiterated. Hopefully. I gulped. Now, if you'll just concentrate on the watch, and try to clear your mind of all other thoughts. The watch swung like a pendulum. I followed it as best I could. I tried to clear my mind whilst the doctor calmly recited a repetitive string of hypno clichés. Relax. Clear your mind. Concentrate on the watch. Your eyelids are heavy. You're feeling drowsy. Empty your mind. Follow the watch. Blah blah, blah. Right, well, thank you. We won't keep you any longer, doctor, my mother said. Come on, Peter, let's get you home. Goodbye, Peter, and don't forget about that diary, the doctor said, smiling and nodding as if to say leave. I've witnessed hypnosis on TV numerous times, and since I'm unsure whether or not he actually hypnotized me, I'm presuming he did. But asking one way or the other seemed silly. Surely I'd know. I don't recall having a conversation about a diary, yet I knew exactly what he was talking about. I'm to keep a diary next to my bed so I can write my dreams down the moment I awake. Maybe that proves that he really did hypnotize me. It felt strange as we left the surgery. Like I'd just woken up and hadn't quite come round. I climbed in the passenger door of my mother's car. Am I going straight to school or home first? I asked. Home first, you can go in this afternoon, she replied as she fastened her seatbelt. She turned the key and as the engine chugged to life, said, well, that was certainly an eye-opener. What? Listening to your dreams. I gulped and feared the worst. What did I say? I nervously asked. Why don't you have a listen, she said, pulling a cassette from her pocket and handing it to me. What's this? I knowingly asked. It's the recording of your hypnosis, she replied. Pop it in, she suggested, nodding towards the in-car cassette player. I'd rather listen to it at home. I replied. Was I out for long? 15, maybe 20 minutes or so. Don't you remember? Well, no, 1 minute he was dangling that watch in front of me and the next you said let's go. It must feel very strange, she said. I've never been hypnotized before, she added. I didn't reply, but did try to recall if I felt anything at all. Very little was said as we drove home. I stared out of the window and watched the urban sprawl morph into suburbia and eventually into open countryside. The cassette felt warm in my hand. I know my dreams are weird, but I tend to forget them soon enough. I'm not sure if I want to hear them in detail. Mum slowed down as she approached the hamlet. As usual, she smiled and waved at the locals on the way through. Our house is on the far side, and as sod's law would have it, we have to wait for a humongous cattle herd to cross from one field to another before we can continue on the final 50 yards of the journey. It's times like this I wish we lived in town again, Mum said as we waited. Unlike traffic lights, the herd can take 5 or 10 minutes to cross, and they do it twice a day. We could have listened to all of that at this rate, Mum said, noticing the cassette that sits uncomfortably in my hand. Eventually, the cows crossed and the road was reopened. The farmer gave Mum a cheery wave and she smiled and waved back, before chuntering under her breath about building a tunnel. Why don't we give that tape a listen, she suggested as she pushed the eject button on the kitchen cassette player. I'd rather listen to it on my own, in my room, I replied. And I'd rather you listen to it with me, in here, she told me as she held an expectant hand out. Thank you, she chirped as I placed the cassette in her palm. Listening to one's own voice is always slightly odd. That doesn't sound like me, was my initial thought. It began with the doctor asking me to confirm some simple details such as my name, hometown, if I knew what day it was, and strangely, the color of the sea. I couldn't help but snigger when I heard my reply, a green, a blue, a gray. Did you have any dreams last night, Peter? Yes. Can you describe it for us? I was in my room and my mum. Well, I think it was my mum. It could have been an aunt or someone. Anyway, she was telling me how nice my undergarments were, and I looked down to see I was wearing girls' undergarments. As in, knickers. Yes, and bra. I glanced nervously at my mother and insisted that I don't recall any of this. Mum advised me to just sit and listen. What color were they? Blue. Anything else? They were really tight. I tried to get the bra off, but I couldn't. Mum, or the woman, said it was a special bra that I can't remove by myself. She challenged me to try again. And? Could you get it off, Peter? I don't know. I don't think so. I think I woke up. I remember the very last bit. I confessed to my mother about the bra. I gulped. Shush. Mum hushed. It's important that we listen. And the night before last. Did you have any dreams? Yes. Can you describe it for us? I'd wet the bed and Mum, or whoever, was really angry with me. She said she'd take me to the chemist's to buy some big boys' nappies and said I'd have to wear them for bed. Then we were in the chemist's. The one on the high street with all the mobility aids in the window. But they didn't have any big boys' nappies. Peter, my mother exclaimed when I turned the tape off. I don't want to listen anymore, this is freaky. I don't even remember that one, I retorted. I think it's important that you do listen, Peter, my mother said. I told her that I didn't want her listening to this kind of shit. Language, Peter, she snapped. I've already heard it. She reminded me. Which is why I know that you should hear it too. Okay, but please. Can't I listen on my own in my room? I asked. With headphones on, I added. I think it's best that we listen together, then talk about it. Then you can listen to it on your own if you want, she replied. She smiled and held her hand out. I gave her the cassette and gulped as she put it in and pressed the play button. Playing musical statues and my party dress is sort of floating around me. It's really hard to stand still. Oops, wrong side. My mother said as she pushed the auto reverse button. Street with all the mobility aids in the window. But they didn't have any big boys' nappies. Only girls' ones. I glanced at my mother, who raised an eyebrow. Now I hear it. I do vaguely recall a dream involving girls' nappies. I gulped and hung my head as the cassette rolled on, revealing details of my dreams that even I can't recall. Well, not whilst fully conscious anyway. And bought a huge pack. Too big for a carrier bag. I had to carry them through town and everyone knew. When we got home I put them in my drawer. Each one had a different picture on the front. A princess, a kitten, a teddy bear, a butterfly. Loads of different designs. Mum told me to choose my favorite to put under my pillow. Ready for bedtime. And did you have to wear one, Peter? I don't know. I think so. I remember choosing one and Mum telling me it was nice. Then she gave me a pair of see-through rubber knickers with frilly trim and I complained that they were too girly. I think it ended there. Possibly. Any other dreams you'd like to tell us about? There are lots of school ones. School ones? Dreams about going to school dressed as a girl. There's one where I go to school in Scotland and have to wear a kilt because that's the uniform. Do you have this particular dream often, Peter? Sort of. It's always a bit different. Sometimes it's a normal skirt or one of those school dresses they wear on Neighbours. Are your dreams often about going to school and wearing an girl's uniform? Not always. Sometimes it's a swimming lesson but I'm wearing a costume because I forgot my trunks. One week the scoutmaster was sick so we had to go to guides instead. And you dressed like the other guides? We had to. So it wasn't just you. It was all the other boys too? Yes. I think so. I can't remember. Are you going to make me listen to all of this? I glumly asked. My mother nodded. Have you any idea how shameful it is for me? I can imagine that it's not pleasant. But it's important that you hear it. I'd rather destroy it and forget about it. Oh, I'm sure you would, Peter. But forgetting about it will be easier said than done, she retorted. The only way we're going to get to the bottom of this is to tackle it head on. I hung my head. I guess she's right. I turned back into the uncomfortable revelations emanating from the cassette player. Cousin's back garden, there's a fish pond. I don't know how but I fell in. We only went for the day so I didn't have a change of clothes and had to wear one of my cousin's dresses whilst my clothes dried on the washing line. He did fall in that pond once. But I can assure you he didn't. Try not to interrupt his chain of thought. Peter? Yes. Could you tell us about any other dreams where you've ended up wearing girls' clothes? Yes. I am trying to convince a teacher that I'm in the wrong class because this one's full of girls. Then I try to convince her that I'm in the wrong school because this one's full of girls. I tell her I'm a boy and shouldn't be here, and she tells me that lots of boys go to girls' schools. Hen, I realize I'm wearing the same uniform as the girls and I take my seat. But I'm still angry because the teacher keeps calling us girls and she knows. It's an interesting theme, isn't it? My mother smugly stated as the tape ended. I couldn't rely on. The blood was rushing to my head and I'm certain I must have been purple with embarrassment. This is a true story. This is how Mom come to know about my transsexuality. It is 1969 and I am living with my mom in Sweden. Summer was going down the drain. It had rained almost every other day and my 10-week summer holiday was soon coming to an end. Like so many other mornings, I took my bike and rode to the beach not far from the village where I lived. There I used to stay in one of the old changing huts reading a book or magazine or to just be alone. To my mum I used to say that I was going to be with a friend and that I would be home in time for supper. But the truth was I had no friends and wanted no one. I want to be alone because I needed to come to terms with myself and my desire to be a girl instead of a boy. For many years I had felt this longing of being a girl. It had made me do things that had made my classmates rather suspicious of me, and they had begun teasing me, calling me all sorts of names including Sissy. Even my mom had started to ask me questions like, why had I not cut my hair like she had told me to a million times? Was it because I wanted to have my hair to look like a girl? And was it me that had been in her wardrobe? I denied those accusations strongly and promised to have my hair cut, but I just couldn't bring myself to go to the barber. I wanted to have curls in my hair like Madeline, the most beautiful girl in my class, the whole school even. I so envied of her and all the other girls. It made my heart ache that I was not like them, but I rather plain boy that no one liked. It was drizzling then I reached the beach, and I quickly locked and hid my bike in the usual place so that no one would see that there was anyone there. I had with me some food, drink and a book that I had tried to read for a whole week now. I went to my usual cabin, the one that stood apart from the others. The door had no lock on the outside but had a hasp on the inside. The cabin itself was about 3'6" square and had a bench on the far side. A small window let in some light, but I also had a candle and matches hidden under a loose floorboard. I saw it immediately I opened the door. Hanging on one of the pegs was a bikini that someone had forgotten. I looked up and down the beach to try and see if there was someone else. But the beach was completely deserted, so I quickly sneaked inside and locked the door. With shaking hands and a hammering heart, I took the bikini from the peg. It was pink with black polka dots and had clasps that looked like brass at the sides of the panty and at the back of the bra. From the look of it, it must have been quite expensive. It was dry and in size 40, the same size Mom took. That I knew from my visits to her closet. In other words, a bit too large for me, but even so I just had to try it on. After another quick look to see if there were anybody else in the vicinity, I closed and locked the door, then started to undress. Telling me this was too good to be true, I put on the bikini, starting with the panty. It was then I was hooking it up that I saw that it could be adjusted in quite a simple manner by pulling on the side straps. With the panty now on and adjusted, I turned to the bra. It took me quite a while to get the back clasps to connect. I then adjusted the shoulder straps like I had seen Mom do ever so often. This was only the third or perhaps fourth time I wore a bra. It felt so good, so right. It would have been a lie to say that I was not excited, but it was no longer like the first time I wore women's clothing some 2 years ago. This time it was more like a confirmation of my true self. I wished there had been a mirror so I could have taken a good look at myself. Looking down at my chest, I saw that the bra cups, although made with some sort of stiffener underneath, still looked rather empty. This was quickly solved by rolling up my socks, one in each cup. To this day I still do not know what drove me to leave the cabin. It had stopped raining and it looked like there might even be a bit of sunshine. The beach was still empty, so I decided to take a quick dip in the sea. The water wasn't exactly warm but not too cold either. When I got out of the water I realized that I had no towel to dry myself with. This was not a great problem since now the sun had finally broken through the clouds and the temperature was quickly rising. Becoming rather bold, I decided to take a stroll along the still deserted beach. I should have known it was a bad idea, but I just had to do it, and I walked too far and therefore missed hearing the first car. When I finally returned, the beach wasn't exactly full of people, but there were far too many to make it possible for me to get back into the cabin unseen. All I could do was to hide behind some bushes and hope that no one stole my clothes in the meantime, and that it would soon be possible for me to get to the cabin. Time dragged on and on and on, and still more people come to the beach. The sun now shone from an almost cloudless sky. Several times I feared I might get spotted, especially then 2 of my classmates suddenly come running by, but luckily they're too busy chasing each other to see me there I was hiding. Yes, I told myself it had been too good to be true. Now I was almost certain to be found out and the ridiculing would never stop. I cursed myself. I shouldn't have left the cabin, I ought to have known this could happen. It was very late in the evening then I finally dared to leave my hiding place and make a quick desperate dash to the cabin. All my clothes were still there, so I changed into them in a hurry. My heart was pounding like mad in my chest. The bikini was completely dry by now, so I decided to bring it with me. It was such a good find that I just couldn't give it up any matter what. My greatest worry by now was what to tell Mom. I should have been home hours ago. Just as I had expected, Mom was beside herself from worrying over what could have happened to me. When I got home and found her in the kitchen, I told her the story I had rehearsed on my way back, that I and my pal had been too carried away building a raft that we had totally forgotten about time. Mom told me that she had been in contact with all of my mates. They had all told her that I had not been with them for ages. So where had I been? I quickly realized that I had to give her a story that was as close to the truth as I could without telling her the truth. So I told her that I had been alone at the beach to think about things like school and some of the things that some of my classmates had done to me. They thought I was a sissy, and then I had fallen asleep by the warmth of the sun, and that I had only awoken then it had gotten colder. Mom was still skeptical, but I stuck to my new story. After I had eaten my now completely dry supper, Mom sent me to bed. She informed me that we would have to talk more about this tomorrow. I went upstairs and into my room with the bikini still hidden in my jeans jacket. I quickly undressed and went to the bathroom to take my usual shower before bed. I heard Mom come upstairs but thought nothing of it. Suddenly Mom burst into the bathroom, the bikini in her hand, demanding to know what it was doing in my jeans jacket. Shocked by the sudden change in the events, I desperately stammered something that I had found it on the ground. Before I had finished, Mom yanked me out of the shower and pointed to my chest. "You wore it." She screamed and slapped me in my face with the bikini. I screamed, "No," but Mom just turned me around so I could see myself in the bathroom mirror. The truth was plain to see. My chest and hips bore the distinct outline of the bikini. I had simply been too long in the summer Sunday. That night I told Mom between sobs and streams of tears of my transsexuality, although I didn't have that word at the time. Mom took me to several doctors in the vain hope they could cure me. However, instead, they all told her and me there is no cure. They went on to tell her to make the best you can of the situation. This was something Mom found very hard to accept. This is a true story. This is how Mom come to know about my transsexuality. A sissy's mother's wish. I thought for a while about the question I had been asked before answering. "I really do not know," I said. My brother looked me up and down and smiled. "Because it's fun," he told me as he jumped off the dresser and twirled around in his pink satin pajamas, grinning from ear to ear. "Boys' clothes are just so," he said, forging a frown. "Boring," he smiled. "But girls' clothes." Meanwhile, their mother is traveling interstate and wondering how James and John are getting on. It's been 3 years since their father passed away, and ever since that fateful day, she's been more afraid of losing her 2 sons than anything. She feared that one day they'd meet a young lady and marry, and as the old saying goes, a son is a son till he finds a wife, but a daughter's a daughter for life. It's been 8 months since her eldest son James was introduced to the pleasures of femininity, although for him it wasn't very pleasurable to begin with. At the age of 16, she sent James to a finishing school in New Hampshire where he lives as a boarder and learns to be a lady, but as far as he knew at the time, and as far as his younger brother John is currently aware, it's supposed to be a normal boarding school, albeit a very expensive one. James was dropped in at the deep end, stripped of his masculinity, corseted and feminized, and has come a long way. For John, however, he's going to receive the softly approach, and all being well, by the time he enrolls at the same finishing school he'll be a far more willing student from the outset. James and John spent the whole weekend playing dress up. James teaches John how to apply makeup, with the expected results for a beginner, and ends up doing it for him. John finds the whole experience thrilling but can't really fathom why his mother encouraged his brother. The only answer he's received as to why is because it's fun. So, when mother returns, shall we be dressed as girls or boys? John asks as he rolls a silk stocking up his hairless leg. What do you think? James replied. I don't know. John replied as he fastened the suspender clip. That's why I'm asking, he said. He sighed and added, for all I know you could be teasing me and mother's got nothing to do with it. James assured his brother that he wasn't teasing. Why would I do that? He asked. To get me in trouble, John replied. It wouldn't be the first time. But I'd be in just as much trouble. Not if you made sure it was just me wearing mother's clothes, John said as he looked at his reflection, his long slim legs clad in expensive silk stockings, held in place by a suspender belt that's hidden by a pair of champagne French knickers. From his shoulders hangs a matching satin camisole, trimmed with lace and decorated with a tiny satin bow. James assured his brother that he wasn't plotting anything of the sort. It's up to you what you're wearing when she returns, he said. When their mother did return from her trip, both James and John wore their own clothes. John made sure that they'd left her room and wardrobe exactly as she left it 3 days previously because part of him didn't believe that the endeavor was his mother's idea. After a warm welcome, she sent James upstairs with her cases and asked John if they'd been having fun and asked what they'd been doing whilst she was away. Not much really, he guiltily replied. No, she replied. I was hoping that James might have shown you some of the things he's been learning at school. What kind of things? John hesitantly asked. Oh, his mother casually replied. Things like shaving your legs and shaping your eyebrows, she said. Wearing my makeup, my lingerie, that kind of thing. John gulped. Is that what he does at school? You haven't answered my question yet, she replied. And if I'm not mistaken, it does look like you've at least shaped your eyebrows. John sheepishly stammered. Yeah. James did it. And the rest? She asked. John gulped and nodded. What felt like a silly, impulsive and maybe even naughty bit of fun now feels shameful and deeply humiliating in the cold light of day. John reiterated his question about what James does at school. I think you'll find that he does lots of different things at school. Pampering, preening and enjoying nice clothes is just a small part of it. Shyly, John asked his mother if it was her idea and she said it was. Why? He asked. Because if you can learn to enjoy it, you'll be much happier when you start boarding school, she told him. What kind of school is it? John asked. His mother replied and John quizzed, You mean, like girls go to? Of course, only this one accepts boys too, she replied. She glanced towards the door and the sound of James returning. They waited in silence for a few seconds until he appeared. John's being a bit shy about what you two got up this weekend, she said. James told her exactly what they'd done, from showing his brother how to shave his legs and plucking his eyebrows, to trying on her underwear, clothes and nightwear. And did he enjoy it? She asked. John gulped and felt increasingly guilty when his brother told her that he did. He loved your blue baby doll, he added. Who wouldn't? Their mother grinned. Once you've realized just how lovely some ladies' garments feel against the flesh, there's no going back, she said. And I think by doing it this way, John's transition won't be traumatic like yours was. A frown crossed James' face and he hung his head a little. I wish I'd been a bit more willing and hadn't tried to fight it, he said, before wishing he'd been forewarned too. Well, you came round eventually, his mother said. If John was the eldest, it would have been he who'd been dropped in at the deep end and you'd be in his position now. John listened intently as he tried to get his head around just what was going on. What position? He asked. Being mentored by your big brother, his mother replied. By the time you start finishing school, you could be halfway to being a lady, providing you enjoyed the weekend as much as James says you did. John couldn't deny anything that his brother had told his mother, but he also couldn't allow himself to admit it either. Yes, he enjoyed playing dress-up all weekend, but now some of the finer details of the boarding school he'll soon be attending have been revealed. What seemed sweet is beginning to taste a little bit sour. Why do you want me to be a lady? He hesitantly asked, glancing at his brother and correcting his question. Or us? Because boys always betray their parents, and since your father passed on, I can't risk you betraying me, she said. We won't betray you, John claimed. He wanted to add, what makes you think we would, but his mother interjected with, I know you won't. After a brief uncomfortable silence, at least on John's part, she added, so, now I know what you two have been doing. Aren't you going to ask me about my trip? How was your trip? John asked. It was very nice, thank you, she replied. And I brought you a present, she told him. James asked if she'd brought him one too. You've already got one, she smiled. What is it? John asked. His mother grinned and said, I'll show you later. She paused to observe his reaction, and although John wasn't bursting with anticipation, he did seem a little disappointed that he'd have to wait and see. She decided to give him a hint and said, it's something for you to wear. After a weird and wonderful weekend being introduced to the joys of femininity, John laid in his bed that evening wearing the baby blue baby doll nightie and with a heart full of worry. He also wore the gift his mother had given him, and it was the very last thing he expected. He didn't want to touch it, but he couldn't help himself. His brother advised him to try not to think about it, but that's far easier said than done. A nervous yet inquisitive hand slid down his short satin nightie, raised it and reached beneath the frilly elastic waistband of his baby doll panties. Its sole intention is to feel the very thing it didn't want to feel. John gulped as he ran his trembling fingers over and around the smooth steel cage and tiny brass padlock that encased his boyhood, trying desperately not to think about it. Run, Sissy, run away. Fleeing his horrible stepmother to spend